Welcome to The Adventure of the Alchemist's Folly, a Sherlock Holmes adventure from the series The Consulting Detective's War. Holmes in World War I, playing in the year 1916. For many years, these records of my friend's service during the Great War remained sealed, filed away as matters of national security. They tell not of trench warfare, but of a deadlier, silent conflict. At Mycroft's behest, Sherlock Holmes applied his singular genius to the world of espionage, foiling plots that threatened the very heart of the Allied effort. These are the tales of that secret war. Let us begin, then, with the first of these declassified accounts, a curious and vital case which I have called The Adventure of the Alchemist's Folly. Chapter 1. The autumn of 1916 had settled upon London like a shroud, and the relentless drizzle that beat against our windows at 221B Baker Street seemed to echo the grim tidings from the continent. Inside, however, a cheerful fire crackled in the grate, casting dancing shadows upon the familiar clutter of my friend's possessions. Holmes himself was a study in controlled stillness, draped over his armchair, his long, thin fingers steepled before him. A profound lethargy had claimed him for days, a state of intellectual ennui that even the most sensational headlines of the Great War could not penetrate. The quiet of the evening was shattered not by a gentle knock, but by a frantic, percussive rapping upon our front door that spoke of dire urgency. It was the sound of a man for whom every second was a precious commodity rapidly dwindling. Holmes opened one eye, a flicker of interest in their grey depths. A moment later, the tread of heavy, measured footsteps ascended the stairs, and Mrs. Hudson ushered in a man whose bearing and uniform bespoke the military. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his great coat dark with rain, and the face he turned to us was etched with a deep and weary strain. This was Major Alistair Finch, a man clearly accustomed to command, yet who now carried an almost unbearable weight upon his shoulders. "Mr. Holmes, forgive this intrusion. My name is Major Finch. I have been sent from the War Office on a matter of the utmost, indeed of national gravity," replied Major Alistair Finch. His voice was a low baritone, taut with controlled anxiety. Holmes gestured languidly towards the visitor's chair. "You are most welcome, Major. Pray, shed your coat and take a seat by the fire. Watson, perhaps the Major would care for something to ward off the chill. Any matter of national gravity is surely best discussed in comfort," replied Sherlock Holmes. The Major declined with a curt shake of his head. Remaining standing as if to sit would be to concede a moment's respite he could not spare. "There is no time, sir. I come to you about Professor Alistair Blackwood. I am told you are familiar with his work." Major Alistair Finch answered. "Blackwood of Cambridge, the author of On the Catalytic Properties of the Platinum Group? A first-class mind, one of the few chemists in England capable of original thought," explained Sherlock Holmes. "The very same. For the past year he has been leading a research team at a secure facility. His objective was to formulate an antidote to a new German phosgene variant. A gas, Mr. Holmes, of such horrifying efficacy that it threatens to break our lines completely," remarked Major Alistair Finch. A cold knot tightened in my stomach. Having served in the medical corps, I had seen the ghastly work of such weapons first-hand, and the memory was fresh. Good heavens! And the professor, was he successful? Dr. John Watson replied. Major Finch's expression grew darker still. He spoke his next words slowly, each one a leaden weight. We believe he was on the very cusp of a breakthrough. But this afternoon, Professor Blackwood was found dead in his laboratory. Major Alistair Finch answered. Holmes shifted slightly in his chair, his expression betraying only academic interest, not alarm. A tragic loss for British science. An accident with his own volatile concoctions, I presume? It is a common enough end for the incautious chemist, Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Indeed. The room was locked from the inside. A shattered beaker, the reek of cyanide. The official conclusion is accidental death, or perhaps suicide, given the pressures upon him, replied Major Alistair Finch. Then I fail to see what service I can be. The matter appears concluded, however lamentably. You require a eulogist, Major, not a detective. Sherlock Holmes responded. A flash of frustration crossed the Major's face. He took a half-step closer to the fire, his voice dropping to a near whisper, charged with an intensity that commanded the room. That would be so, Mr. Holmes, were it not for one fact. His research notes, the culmination of a year's work, the complete formula for the antidote, have vanished, remarked Major Alistair Finch. The transformation in my friend was instantaneous and remarkable. The languor fell from him like a discarded cloak. He sat bolt upright. His eyes, which had been dull and listless, now blazed with a fierce, hawk-like light. The envy was gone, replaced by the familiar, electrifying energy of the hunter who has just caught the scent of his quarry. Vanished? From a laboratory locked from the inside? Major, you have been holding back the most salient feature of the entire affair. Pray, begin your account again, but this time omit nothing, Sherlock Holmes pointed out. Major Finch had finished his account, the last words hanging in the warm air of our Baker Street lodgings, thick with the scent of pipe tobacco and coal smoke, like a death knell. The fire crackled in the hearth, a comforting sound that did little to dispel the profound chill his story had cast over me. The fate of our men at the front, the very security of the nation, seemed to rest upon the recovery of some missing papers. Yet, as I glanced at my friend, I saw not the consternation of a patriot, but the keen, predatory glimmer of an intellect that had just scented its prey. So, a body in a hermetically sealed laboratory, missing notes of incalculable value, and an official explanation of accidental death that you, a man of action, find unconvincing. The problem has certain points of interest, deduced Sherlock Holmes. His voice was calm, almost academic, a stark contrast to the Major's strained urgency. Interest, Mr. Holmes, it is a catastrophe. Without that antidote, our armies face decimation. I must identify the responsible party. The list of personnel with access is exceedingly small, said Major Alistair Finch. Then let us begin with that list. Names, Major. Personalities and functions are the raw data of any investigation, stated Sherlock Holmes. Finch leaned forward, the old leather of his chair groaning in protest, his elbows on his knees, his tone low and conspiratorial. Firstly, there is Mr. Silas Croft, the head of security, a former regimental sergeant major, a good man, but rigid. He sees the world through a lens of regulations and timetables, and is utterly convinced that no breach was possible. He insists it was an accident. Major Alistair Finch said, "A man who believes in walls." And within those walls, Sherlock Holmes said. Professor Blackwood's protégé, a Dr. Eleanor Vance, a truly brilliant chemist, I am told. She was devoted to Blackwood, worked with him day and night. She appears quite shattered by the event, yet possesses a remarkable composure, responded Major Alistair Finch. Holmes steepled his fingers, his gaze seemingly fixed upon a point somewhere beyond our visitor. I recognized the signs, however. It was not a vacant stare, but one of intense concentration, his mind working at a furious pace. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's, made a brief, almost imperceptible sweep of the Major's person, from his tense posture down to the very soles of his boots. After a long moment of this unnerving silence, his eyes, with a sudden keen flicker, returned to the Major's face, a hint of amusement playing in their depths. "Your journey here was a hurried one, I perceive. You came directly from your club in Pall Mall, but took the precaution of dismissing your cab at the top of the street to approach on foot. An admirable, if ultimately transparent, attempt at discretion," replied Sherlock Holmes. Major Finch sat bolt upright, his face a mask of astonishment. I confess I myself was equally bewildered by my friend's pronouncement. "Good heavens, Holmes, how could you possibly deduce such a thing?" remarked Major Alistair Finch. "It is simplicity itself. Your boots are polished to a military sheen, yet upon the inner side of your left heel is a small, caked deposit of reddish-brown clay. There is no such clay within 100 yards of Baker Street. Our own mud is of a uniform greyish-black. However, a fortnight ago the gas company performed repairs on a main near the Athenaeum Club, and the disturbed earth there, when damp, produces precisely that hue. A trifle, I grant you, but it is from such trifles that a case is constructed. You see my point?" deduced Sherlock Holmes. The Major stared, utterly baffled. It was a look I knew well, the bewilderment of a man whose careful secrets had been laid bare in an instant. I felt a familiar, fond exasperation, and decided to translate for him. "That he should take the case, Major, that is his point," wondered Dr. John Watson. A slow smile spread across Holmes's thin lips. He rose from his chair in a single, fluid motion, the languor that had previously held him gone, replaced by an electric energy that now seemed to fill the very room. "Watson is, as ever, my most able interpreter. Yes, Major, I will accompany you to Cambridge. The problem of a locked room is one that has always held a particular fascination for me. Watson, pack your bag and your service revolver. There is no train at this hour, so I presume you have transport, Major," stated Sherlock Holmes. "A staff car is waiting, Mr. Holmes. It will get us there before dawn," Major Alistair Finch said. Within the quarter hour, we were seated in the cold, Spartan interior of a military motor car. The familiar comforts of Baker Street were replaced by the sharp smell of oil and damp leather, and the steady, powerful thrum of the engine vibrated through the floorboards. As we plunged into the darkened streets of London, the lights of the gas-lit thoroughfares flashed across Holmes's sharp profile in rhythmic, fleeting bursts of gold, before we left them behind for the winding, black country roads. I felt a familiar mixture of apprehension and excitement. We were on our way to a place of secrets, a fortress of science where a man had died and the security of the realm had been breached from within. Our motor car left the familiar clamour of Cambridge behind, its engine a steady drone against the flat grey expanse of the fens. A damp wind whispered across the fields, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and coal smoke. Before long, a severe brick wall rose from the landscape, topped with a cruel glint of coiled wire. A single monolithic iron gate barred our path, and as our driver slowed, the crunch of gravel under our tyres was the only sound to break the oppressive silence. A man of military bearing, whose posture was as rigid as the iron bars he guarded, emerged from a small brick outbuilding. He conferred briefly with Major Finch before the gate groaned open, its metal teeth scraping against the track. Our guide for the day had arrived. His voice was strained as he made the introduction. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, may I present Mr. Silas Croft, our head of security?" "Mr. Croft will escort us to the laboratory," said Major Alistair Finch. Croft was a tall, spare man, with a face that seemed chiselled from granite, and a moustache trimmed with geometric precision. He offered a curt nod in place of a handshake, his eyes sweeping over us with an air of professional scepticism. His boots clicked with authority on the paved path as he led the way. He spoke in a clipped, toneless manner, as if reading from an official report. "Welcome to the facility, gentlemen. I must insist you remain with me at all times. As for this unfortunate business with Professor Blackwood, it is a clear-cut case of accidental death. He was a brilliant man, but prone to carelessness when engrossed. The laboratory was sealed from the inside. There is no mystery here," Mr. Silas Croft said. Holmes offered no reply, his grey eyes instead darting about, taking in the meticulous order of the grounds, the placement of the guards, the very angle of the security lamps. Croft led us to a heavy steel door which hissed open and then shut behind us, its lock engaging with a solid, definitive thud that cut us off entirely from the outside world. We now stood in a long, sterile corridor. The air was cool and carried the faint antiseptic tang of chemicals, underscored by the persistent low thrum of the ventilation system. Every sound was amplified here. Our own footsteps echoed with a sharp, clinical report from the tiled floor and bare walls, a stark contrast to the comfortable clutter of Baker Street. "You are quite certain it was sealed from within, Mr. Croft?" Holmes inquired, his tone mild. "Explained Sherlock Holmes." A flicker of irritation crossed Croft's face. "Absolutely. The door was bolted, the windows are reinforced and barred, and the ventilation system, our most advanced feature, is designed for precisely this eventuality. It is a one-way exhaust. Air is drawn out with considerable force and passed through a series of filters before being expelled high above the roof. Nothing, not even a wisp of smoke, can pass back through it. It is a sealed tomb, save for that single outlet to the sky," answered Mr. Silas Croft. He gestured with pride towards a heavy steel door at the end of the hall, an official wax seal still intact across its seam. A faint, low hum, a deep, thrumming pulse, seemed to emanate from beyond it. A constant, resonant vibration, felt more in the soles of our boots than heard with our ears. "An impressive design," Holmes murmured, his gaze fixed not on the door, but on the ceiling high above. "It ensures no dangerous element may escape into the facility, but also that no helpful element may enter. A double-edged sword, is it not?" Sherlock Holmes said. He stated flatly, with a hint of dismissive pride. "Its purpose is containment, Mr. Holmes, not rescue. The Professor knew the risks. What you see before you is the scene of a tragic but entirely preventable accident," said Mr. Silas Croft. Holmes stepped forward, his tall, thin frame silhouetted against the stark light of the corridor. He examined the seal on the door, his long fingers hovering just above the wax without touching it, a silent challenge in his posture. The air grew thick with anticipation. "An accident within an impenetrable room," he mused, more to himself than to us. "There is no such thing as an impenetrable room, Mr. Croft. There are only unimaginative observers." His voice fell to a whisper, sharp as shattered glass. "Major, if you would be so good as to break the seal." Sherlock Holmes responded. Mr. Croft produced a heavy ring of keys, and with a series of loud, metallic clicks that echoed in the stone corridor, he disengaged the locks on the laboratory door. A gust of air, thick with a dozen competing chemical odours, washed over us as he pushed it open. The room within was a chaotic temple of science. Glass beakers and retorts littered every surface. Charts covered the walls, and the low hum of some electrical apparatus provided a constant, monotonous drone. His voice was as stiff as his posture. "As you can see, gentlemen, everything is precisely as we found it. The seals were intact. An unfortunate accident, nothing more," remarked Mr. Silas Croft. Holmes paid him no mind. He had already stepped past the threshold, his grey eyes sweeping the room with an intensity that seemed to absorb every detail at once. He moved with a cat-like tread, his footsteps unnervingly quiet on the flagstone floor. I followed, my own senses assaulted by the sharp tang of ammonia and something vaguely acidic that caught in the back of my throat. Holmes, however, had frozen mid-stride. He raised his head slightly, his nostrils twitching like a hound catching a scent on the wind. His voice was low, cutting through the chemical haze. "Watson, your nose is not merely a decorative feature. Apply it. Beneath the acrid tang of formaldehyde and the sharpness of ether, there is another ghost in this room," explained Sherlock Holmes. I inhaled deeply, attempting to pass the cacophony of smells. At first, I detected nothing but the expected fumes of a working laboratory. Then, faint and elusive, I caught it, a delicate, almost sweet aroma, tragically out of place. "Bitter almonds," I murmured, a sudden chill tracing its way down my spine. Dr. John Watson said, "Precisely. Prussic acid. Mr. Croft's accident begins to take on a rather more deliberate shape," declared Sherlock Holmes. Croft scoffed, a sharp, dismissive sound escaping his lips. "Professor Blackwood worked with hundreds of compounds. Cyanide was certainly among them. A cracked beaker, a moment of carelessness," answered Mr. Silas Croft. "Carelessness does not account for this," Holmes interrupted sharply, stated Sherlock Holmes. He moved to a workbench cluttered with glassware. His long, nimble fingers pointed not to a shattered flask, but to a Bunsen burner, an unusual contraption. Its brass barrel was modified with a small covered crucible fixed above the flame nozzle, and a delicate clockwork mechanism was attached near its base. It looked more like a strange timepiece than a piece of scientific equipment. "What is it, Holmes? Some new device for his antidote research?" Dr. John Watson added. "It is a device for murder, my dear Watson, and one of a most subtle and wicked design. Observe." He gestured to the crucible. "This is not for boiling, but for sublimation. A slow, steady vaporization controlled by this tiny clockwork mechanism here. One winds it, sets the time, and places a solid cyanide compound within the chamber," declared Sherlock Holmes. He tapped a small lever on the clockwork with his fingernail, producing a faint metallic ping. Croft had gone pale, his rigid certainty finally beginning to fracture. "At the appointed hour," Holmes continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "a small, concealed element within the base provides just enough heat to gasify the poison. Not a sudden release, but a slow, insidious leak that would perfectly mimic an experimental mishap. The professor was not conducting an experiment, he was the subject of one," deduced Sherlock Holmes. The hum of the machinery suddenly seemed sinister, the silence between Holmes's words profound. The ghost of bitter almonds was no accident. It was a spectre summoned by a deliberate hand. Holmes straightened up, his examination complete. A new, determined light shone in his eyes. "We have established the how, Watson. Now we must uncover the who. Mr. Croft, I believe our next interview must be with the person who knew the professor's work and his habits most intimately. We shall speak with his protégé, Dr. Vance," Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. "The room in which we awaited our interview was as sterile and devoid of character as a surgeon's theatre. 4 whitewashed walls, a plain metal table, and 3 unyielding chairs were its only furnishings. The air, scrubbed clean of the laboratory's chemical tang, smelled faintly of carbolic soap, and a low, monotonous hum from some distant machinery was the only sound to break the oppressive silence. Holmes sat opposite me, his long fingers steepled, his eyes fixed upon the blank door as if he could deduce the very thoughts of the person on the other side. "Patience, Watson. A blank canvas often reveals the most about the artist who dares to paint upon it," declared Sherlock Holmes. As he spoke, the door opened with a soft metallic click, and Dr. Eleanor Vance entered. She was a woman of perhaps 30 years, with dark hair pinned in a severe but practical fashion, and eyes that held a sharp, analytical intelligence. Her movements were precise, economical, and she betrayed no hint of the shock or grief one might expect from a person whose mentor had just met a terrible end. I found myself scrutinizing her remarkable composure, wondering if it were the product of a disciplined scientific mind, or the unnatural calm of a practiced deceiver. "Mr. Holmes, Major Finch said you wished to speak with me," responded Dr. Eleanor Vance. Her voice was steady and clear, without the slightest tremor. Holmes gestured to the empty chair, and the scrape of its legs against the concrete floor was a harsh, discordant note in the quiet room. "Indeed, Dr. Vance, you were Professor Blackwood's closest associate. Pray tell me of his state of mind these past few weeks," deduced Sherlock Holmes. "He was consumed," as he always was when on the cusp of a breakthrough. Brilliant, of course, but his obsession often made him careless of his own safety. He saw protocols as impediments to progress, said Dr. Eleanor Vance. She spoke of the dead Nan with a detached professionalism, her hands resting calmly one upon the other on the table before her. Her composure was absolute, a display of control so unsettling in its perfection. "Careless enough to miscalculate the vaporization of a cyanide compound in a sealed room," remarked Sherlock Holmes. His question was as sharp and sudden as a scalpel's edge. And it was then I saw it. For the briefest of moments, a flicker of something, not fear, but perhaps a cold, hard calculation, passed behind her eyes before the placid mask settled once more. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared, but I had seen it. The professor took many risks with volatile compounds. It is a profound tragedy, but not, I fear, a surprising one, remarked Dr. Eleanor Vance. Her voice held firm, yet I thought I detected a subtle tightening in her tone. Holmes, sensing a subtle resistance, shifted his line of inquiry. And his rivals? Did his work attract undue attention? From Dr. Weber, perhaps? Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Heinrich Weber. They corresponded, certainly. It was a fierce but professional rivalry. Alistair was confident that Weber was years behind him in the race for an effective antidote. Responded Dr. Eleanor Vance. She paused then, a fractional hesitation, as if weighing her next words with immense care. The faint hum of the building seemed to grow louder in the ensuing silence. Although there was something new, a breakthrough. Alistair had recently acquired a sample of a new German catalyst. He was intensely secretive about its origin, but he was certain it was the key. He claimed it would render all other research obsolete. He was triumphant. With masterful subtlety, she had laid the clue before us. A German catalyst in the hands of a man with a German rival. Holmes leaned back, a glint in his eye, but his expression remained unreadable. "Thank you, Doctor. Your clarity has been most helpful," observed Sherlock Holmes. She gave a curt nod, rose, and departed, the door clicking shut behind her with a sound of crisp finality. For a moment Holmes was silent, his gaze fixed upon the empty chair she had vacated. "Well, Holmes, what do you make of that? A stoic professional or a consummate actress?" wondered Dr. John Watson. "Both, perhaps, Watson. She plays her part exceedingly well. She directs our attention to Weber, but it is the performance itself I find most instructive," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. He rose from his chair, the sudden movement startling me from my thoughts. A new energy seemed to possess him. Now we must hear from the man who guards this stage. Let us see if Mr. Croft's fortress is as impregnable as he believes, explained Sherlock Holmes. Mr. Silas Croft's office was as stark and rigid as the man himself. There were no personal effects, only meticulously filed cabinets, a large oak desk bare save for a single blotter, and a large, precisely rendered diagram of the research facility pinned to the wall. The only sound in the room was the crisp rustle of pages as Croft turned through a heavy security logbook, its spine cracking in protest. The air was still and smelt faintly of floor polish and discipline. "An impenetrable fortress, Mr. Holmes. That is what I have built here. You will find no flaw in our protocols," Mr. Silas Croft said. His voice, a gravelly baritone accustomed to command, punctuated his statement by slapping the logbook shut. A small cloud of dust rose from the cover, dancing in the single beam of sunlight that pierced the grimy window. Holmes, who had been examining the wall diagram with a placid intensity, did not so much as turn his head. "Your diligence is most commendable, Mr. Croft. The logs show, as you say, no unauthorized entries or exits on the night of Professor Blackwood's death. Every soul is accounted for," Sherlock Holmes said. While Croft puffed his chest out at the compliment, I could see that Holmes's attention was not on the ledger, but entirely consumed by the schematic. His eyes, sharp and focused, traced the labyrinth of lines depicting pipes and corridors. It was a fascinating contrast. The security chief, bombastic and certain, focused on the written record of men, while my friend was absorbed by the silent record of bricks and mortar. Precisely, which is why this must be an accident. The laboratory door was bolted from within. The windows are sealed. The ventilation system is a closed loop, pulling air from the roof and expelling it through a series of chemical filters. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. It is, I repeat, impregnable, Mr. Silas Croft replied. Holmes finally turned from the wall, his expression one of mild academic curiosity. He took a slow step towards the desk, his quiet footsteps a stark contrast to Croft's heavy, restless tread. And yet, a fortress is only as strong as its most overlooked detail. This service corridor, here, behind the main laboratory block, what is its purpose? Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. He tapped a thin blue line on the diagram. Croft squinted, stepping closer with a dismissive wave of his hand. A maintenance conduit for the primary ductwork. It is of no consequence. The access panel from the exterior is kept bolted at all times, Mr. Silas Croft said. But the panel from the corridor into the ventilation system itself, it is merely latched, is it not? A simple iron slide to allow for cleaning of the primary air intake, remarked Sherlock Holmes. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Croft's face. The silence in the room was suddenly heavy, the ticking of a clock on the mantelpiece growing louder with each passing second. An unsecured panel that leads directly to the airflow of a sealed room. That, Mr. Croft, is not a fortress. It is a keyhole. Unconventional one, to be sure, but a means of access for anything that can be carried on the air, stated Sherlock Holmes. Croft's face hardened, his mind clearly struggling to reconcile this flaw in his perfect system. He sought refuge in a familiar suspicion, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial growl. If there is a plot, it is foreign. That so-called neutral Dr. Weber, the German, he and Blackwood were bitter rivals. He has the knowledge, and as Dr. Vance will attest, he had the motive. Mr. Silas Croft answered. Holmes retrieved his hat and coat from the stand by the door with calm, decisive movements. He gave no outward sign of having heard Croft's accusation, though I knew he had filed away every word, and looked not at the security chief, but at me. Indeed, it seems our next conversation must be with this rival chemist. Come, Watson, we shall pay a visit to Dr. Heinrich Weber, observed Sherlock Holmes. At Mr. Croft's pointed suggestion, our hansom cab rattled over the ancient cobblestones of Cambridge, its wheels a sharp counterpoint to the distant melodic chime of a college clock. The air, cool and heavy with the scent of damp stone and the venerable aroma of old leather, felt a world away from the stark, chemical-laden atmosphere of the research facility. We were to call upon Dr. Heinrich Weber, the eminent German chemist whose name now hung heavy in our investigation. His rooms were located in a venerable stone building, up a flight of echoing, well-trodden stairs, whose stone was worn smooth by generations of scholars. A crisp knock from Holmes was answered promptly, and we were met by a man of middle height, with pale, intelligent eyes behind steel-rimmed spectacles. His office was a monument to order. Books arranged by size and subject, beakers and glass tubes cleaned to a sparkle, and not a single paper out of place. A faint, clean scent of carbolic soap and old paper hung in the air, the only sound the steady, rhythmic tick of a heavy mantel clock. "Mr. Holmes, I was told to expect you. Please come in. To what do I owe the honor of a visit from the famous Baker Street detective?" Dr. Heinrich Weber replied. "We are assisting the War Office in the matter of the late Professor Blackwood," deduced Sherlock Holmes. At the mention of the name, a flicker of something, was it surprise or merely professional interest, crossed Weber's otherwise placid features. He gestured to two stiff-backed chairs of dark polished wood before his desk, the scrape of their legs loud in the quiet room. A terrible business, a tragedy for the field. Alistair was a formidable mind. Volatile, yes, a man who chased inspiration down the most dangerous of rabbit holes, but a genius nonetheless, responded Dr. Heinrich Weber. "A rival's praise is the most sincere of all. It is said your own work in the field of gaseous toxins often ran parallel to his. Sometimes, I hear, you even arrived at the same destination first," Sherlock Holmes said. Dr. Weber gave a thin, intellectual smile. He did not deny the charge, rather he seemed to embrace it. "Science is a race, Mr. Holmes. Alistair and I were, you might say, competitors in the grandest of contests. I respected his intellect profoundly, even as I worked to surpass it. His death is a loss to our shared pursuit of knowledge, not of victory. To suggest otherwise would be illogical." Dr. Heinrich Weber replied, "And on the evening of your own pursuit of knowledge taking you, Doctor," stated Sherlock Holmes, "I was here, in Cambridge, delivering a lecture on catalytic compounds to the Royal Chemistry Society. There were over 200 souls in attendance. I am quite certain my presence was noted," responded Dr. Heinrich Weber. Holmes did not press the point, but I saw his eyes drift, almost imperceptibly, to a small cork-stoppered vial of deep amber liquid on the doctor's desk. The viscous fluid caught the afternoon light, glowing like a trapped jewel. It was identical in hue to one we had seen in Blackwood's laboratory. Holmes rose, and the interview was clearly at its end. "Thank you for your time, Doctor. You have been most illuminating," Sherlock Holmes responded. As we descended the stone staircase, the heavy oak door closing behind us with a solid thud, the scent of dust and old stone replacing the sterile air of the laboratory, the coolness of the stairwell felt like a release from the room's compressed intellect. My mind reeled. We had met a blustering security chief in Mr. Croft, a preternaturally calm protégé in Dr. Vance, and now a precise, intellectually formidable rival in Dr. Weber. Each presented a mask of sorts, one of indignant duty, one of serene composure, and one of scholarly detachment. Yet behind one of these masks, I felt certain, lay the face of a killer. The problem had not simplified, it had deepened, its roots twisting into complexities I could not yet fathom. We returned from Cambridge to a strained quiet. The interview with Dr. Webber had left me profoundly uncertain, a sentiment that hung heavy in Major Finch's temporary office. It was a Spartan room, smelling of damp wool and carbolic soap. A persistent autumn drizzle pattered against the single window, each drop an insistent tap. Holmes stood by the window, his tall, spare figure silhouetted against the grey light, hands clasped behind his back. He had not spoken since we left the chemist, lost in that profound concentration I knew preceded some formidable mental exertion. Major Finch, for his part, paced the bare floorboards. The rhythmic thud of his boots was the only steady sound, a testament to a military man's impatience with inaction. A sharp rap at the door broke the tense silence. A young corporal entered, boots squeaking on the wood, and handed a telegram to the Major before retreating with a crisp salute. The envelope tore with a loud, abrasive rip, shattering the quiet. Finch's eyes scanned the flimsy paper, and a low exclamation escaped him. His face, already grim, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He slapped the dispatch down upon the desk. His voice was a low growl, tight with terrible certainty. It is as I suspected. The analysis of the residue from Blackwood's retort is complete. Cyanide, as we knew. But the catalyst, Holmes, the catalyst is unmistakable, answered Major Alistair Finch. Holmes turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "And what of it, Major?" deduced Sherlock Holmes. "It is a proprietary compound of iridium and platinum developed in Damascus before the war. Its only application is in the synthesis of nerve agents, and its creator, the only man in England with intimate knowledge of its properties, is Dr. Heinrich Weber." "Major Alistair Finch," answered. The Major's voice rose, striking the bare walls like a hammer. He stabbed a finger at the telegram. "We have him, the motive, the means, and now the signature. I want him arrested at once. Croft will have the man in irons before the hour is out," said Major Alistair Finch. Holmes held up a restraining hand, his calm a stark contrast to the Major's barely contained rage. His voice was dangerously soft. "You will do no such thing, Major," explained Sherlock Holmes. "What? Holmes, this is not one of your Baker Street theatricals. A man is dead, and the security of the nation is at stake. The evidence is absolute," Major Alistair Finch said. "On the contrary, the evidence is merely convenient. It is a signpost, I grant you, but one that may have been deliberately placed to send us down the wrong road. Consider, a master chemist, a spy of the highest order, wishes to murder a rival and steal his work. Would such a man leave behind a chemical signature as unique and identifiable as his own name?" Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. Finch stared, his jaw working. The logic was unassailable, yet it defied his every instinct. He spoke through clenched teeth. "It is arrogance, the hubris of a man who believes he is untouchable," answered Major Alistair Finch. "Or it is a fabrication, Major, a piece of misdirection of the most elegant sort. You see a culprit. I see a puzzle box whose lid appears obvious, but is, I suspect, secured by a far more subtle mechanism. To arrest Webber now would be to spring the trap and alert the true hunter that we are on his trail, stated Sherlock Holmes. The Major snatched his cap from the desk, his face flushed deep crimson. The rain drummed louder against the glass, filling the space between them. I warn you, Holmes, every moment we delay is a victory for the enemy. If this is a mistake, the consequences will rest squarely upon your shoulders, Major Alistair Finch replied. His voice was sharp with finality. I will give you until morning. With that, he turned on his heel and strode from the room. The door slammed shut, its echo a note of utter finality. For a long moment, Holmes remained perfectly still, his gaze fixed on the door as if he could see through it. Then he turned to me, a flicker of that familiar, keen-eyed energy returning to his face. The Major is a man of action, Watson, and sees only the most direct path. He is focused on the man. But the man is irrelevant for the moment. It is the method that concerns me. Come, let us return to the laboratory. The logic of the machine awaits us, stated Sherlock Holmes. The sharp echo of Major Finch's footsteps lingered in the corridor, a testament to their heated confrontation. Holmes, however, appeared entirely unmoved. He stood by the window, his back to me, the picture of serene contemplation, as if the Major's impassioned plea had been nothing more than the buzzing of a fly. The silence in our office grew, punctuated only by the distant, mournful hoot of a train pulling away from Cambridge Station. Come, Watson, there is nothing more for us here. We must return to the laboratory, Sherlock Holmes pointed out. He said it without turning, his voice low, the recent tension entirely gone. I followed without question. Our return to the research facility was a sombre affair. The same guard admitted us, his face a mask of professional indifference, and soon we stood once more within Professor Blackwood's cold, silent laboratory. The air, thick with the phantom sense of ozone and bitter almonds, felt heavy. This time, however, Holmes paid no mind to the cluttered benches or intricate glassware. His gaze was fixed upwards. He paced the stone floor, head tilted back, his keen eyes sweeping the ceiling, tracing the paths of pipes and conduits. The only sound was the soft scuff of his leather shoes, a lonely rhythm in the profound quiet of the room. I watched him, utterly baffled. What could he possibly hope to find in the dusty upper reaches of the chamber? They have all been thinking in 2 dimensions, Watson. A locked door, a sealed window. They see the room as a box, but they have neglected the 3rd dimension. He stopped directly beneath a large iron ventilation grate set high on the wall, 10 feet from the floor. Its grill was thick with the dust of ages. He dragged a heavy wooden stool from a corner, its legs scraping against the flagstones, a jarring interruption to the stillness. With surprising agility, he mounted it and produced his pocket lens. He examined the formidable bolts holding the grate to the wall, tapping each with his fingernail. A faint metallic ring was the only reply. For a full minute he remained there, a statue of concentration, before stepping down, a flicker of triumph now lighting his eyes. The problem of the locked room is at its heart a problem of logic. If a man cannot enter or exit through the conventional means, we must find the unconventional. The official inquiry concluded this grate was untouched, the bolts rusted tight. And so they are, from this side, Sherlock Holmes said. But Holmes, what other side is there? Behind it lies only the main ventilation shaft, Dr. John Watson inquired. Precisely, the one place no one thought to look. Our killer did not enter this room in the traditional sense. He entered the unsecured service corridor 1 floor above, gained access to the main ductwork, and travelled within the walls of this building like a rat in the wainscoting. He arrived behind that very grate. Sherlock Holmes noted. He pointed a long, slender finger upwards. The implication was staggering. It is a masterful piece of deception. The bolts are merely for show. My lens reveals faint scratches on the inner housing, marks consistent with a tool releasing a hidden catch. The entire grate is designed to be removed, but only from within the duct itself. Our murderer entered the lab, set his deadly trap for the professor, and then retreated into the shaft, pulling the heavy grate back into place behind him. To anyone in the room, it would appear to have been sealed for a decade, stated Sherlock Holmes. The sheer audacity of the scheme left me breathless. It was at once fiendishly complex and beautifully simple. It explained everything. This changes the nature of our inquiry, Watson. Such a method, so precise, so athletic, so reliant on an intimate knowledge of this building's anatomy, does not speak of foreign espionage. It suggests something far more personal. The missing notes are a clever distraction, a piece of theatrical misdirection. The true motive lies elsewhere. He fell silent, his eyes fixed on the intricate apparatus of the antidote experiment that still sat upon the central bench. A new plan was clearly forming behind that brilliant brow. We need to see how this machine works, and for that we shall require an expert hand. Find Mr. Croft, Watson, and have him send a message. I wish to request the assistance of Dr. Eleanor Vance for a brief demonstration. Upon our return, the laboratory seemed to hold its breath. A thick silence reigned, broken only by the faint, rhythmic drip of condensation from a cooling retort. Holmes had dispatched a message an hour prior, and now he stood by the central workbench, his tall, gaunt frame casting a long shadow across the polished floor. He had said nothing of his discovery in the ventilation system, yet a new and terrible energy hummed about him, a focus so intense it was almost palpable. He moved a beaker here, adjusted a clamp there, his actions precise and deliberate, like a maestro preparing his instruments for a final, dramatic crescendo. The heavy oak door creaked open, and Dr. Vance entered. If she was surprised by our summons, she gave no outward indication. Her expression was one of cool professionalism, her posture erect. Yet the pallor to her complexion, stark against the dark fabric of her dress, betrayed the strain she must be under. "Ah, Dr. Vance, thank you for coming. I find myself at an impasse regarding a small detail of the professor's apparatus. Your assistance would be invaluable." Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. His voice was unnaturally level, devoid of its usual sharp edges. He gestured towards the workbench, specifically to the Bunsen burner that had so intrigued him earlier. "Of course, Mr. Holmes, I will help in any way I can," Dr. Eleanor Vance replied. She stepped forward. the scent of lavender and carbolic faintly trailing her. The gaslight overhead glinted on the glassware, making the laboratory a cavern of gleaming surfaces and deep shadows. It concerns this modification to the burner's air hole collar, a secondary intake valve. Professor Blackwood was a master of improvisation, but the purpose of this particular addition eludes me. It would seem designed to introduce a second pre-mixed element directly into the stream before combustion. Was he working on a method to achieve a higher, more consistent temperature? Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. His question was posed with an air of academic curiosity, yet I saw the trap being laid. He was not truly asking for information, rather he was presenting her with a theory, inviting her to correct it. That is a logical assumption. The professor was always seeking greater efficiency. Dr. Eleanor Vance answered. Her voice was steady, but her eyes did not quite meet his. They darted instead to the brass valve itself. Logical, yes, but incorrect. A higher temperature would have left telltale signs of extreme heat on the ceramic crucible, which is entirely absent. No, this valve was not for heat. It was for delivery, a means to aerosolize a compound using the burner's own updraft, filling a sealed room with a vapor so subtle it might be mistaken for a simple laboratory mishap. It is a work of profound genius and of profound evil, explained Sherlock Holmes. A dreadful silence fell, punctuated only by the low hiss of gas from the main tap, which Holmes had opened but not lit. Dr. Vance stood frozen, her composure finally beginning to fracture. "That is a monstrous speculation," Dr. Eleanor Vance replied. Her reply was a mere whisper, strained and thin. "It is a monstrous reality, the work of a brilliant chemist, intimately familiar with the victim's methods and with access to his private laboratory. Someone who could construct such a device and then slip away unseen. Perhaps you would be so good as to demonstrate its function. Simply adjust the valve for me," observed Sherlock Holmes. He gestured to the small brass knob. It was the final, damning test. For a long moment she did not move. Then, as if compelled by a will greater than her own, she slowly raised her right hand towards the apparatus. And I saw it. I saw it as clearly as I have ever seen anything in my life. Her hand, that of a gifted and precise scientist, was not steady. It trembled, a fine, uncontrollable tremor that betrayed the utter collapse of the iron composure she had maintained for so long. The sight was more conclusive than any spoken confession. It was the silent, bodily admission of her guilt, hanging palpably in the still, chemical-scented air between us. We had scarcely left the laboratory, the image of Dr. Vance's trembling hand still vivid in my mind, when Holmes brought us to a halt. The sterile silence of the long corridor was broken only by the low hum of distant machinery and the measured tap of our own footsteps on the polished floor. The pressure of a guilty conscience, Watson, is a force more volatile than any chemical compound. It precipitates rash action. We shall not have long to wait, declared Sherlock Holmes. His words were prophetic. From where our corridor met another up ahead, a sudden clamour erupted, a sharp, commanding shout, followed by the jarring clang of a heavy metal door being slammed against its frame. It was the sound of order being violently imposed. "Halt, I say, halt at once," answered Mr. Silas Croft. We quickened our pace and rounded the corner. There, in the harsh glare of an overhead electric lamp, stood Mr. Croft, his posture rigid like a fence post. Before him, a uniformed guard held Dr. Vance firmly by the arm. All composure had vanished from her face, which was deathly pale, and in her free hand she clutched a familiar-looking sheaf of papers. Upon seeing us, a mask of grim satisfaction settled upon Croft's face. "Mr. Holmes, perfect timing. It appears we have apprehended a trespasser in a restricted area, and look what she was attempting to conceal amongst this old equipment," remarked Mr. Silas Croft. He gestured towards an open crate filled with discarded glassware. Dr. Vance flinched at his tone. "That is not true. I found them, just now, tucked away inside that crate," replied Dr. Eleanor Vance. Her voice was thin, a desperate whisper, utterly devoid of conviction. Holmes stepped forward, his expression one of mild curiosity, though his eyes were as sharp as a surgeon's scalpel. "You found them, Doctor? Professor Blackwood's missing notes? How remarkably fortuitous! And yet you chose not to raise the alarm upon this monumental discovery. Instead, you were found here, in this disused storeroom at the far end of the wing. A curious method for celebrating a breakthrough," explained Sherlock Holmes. She stammered, unable to form a coherent reply. Holmes turned his attention to Croft, yet his piercing gaze never truly left the doctor's face. His voice was low and steady, each word a carefully placed weight upon the suffocating silence. "This was not an act of discovery, Mr. Croft. It was an act of return. The murderer took these notes to create the illusion of espionage, but underestimated our persistence. Realizing the missing documents were a beacon pointing directly to foul play, a desperate attempt was made to replace them, to restore the comforting narrative of a simple, tragic accident," remarked Sherlock Holmes. Mr. Croft stared, his mouth slightly agape, as the foundations of his own theories crumbled to dust before his eyes. Dr. Vance offered no further protest. Her silence was a confession in itself. She seemed to shrink under the weight of Holmes's logic. A fatal miscalculation which has served only to confirm everything. "The case, Mr. Croft, is concluded." Holmes's tone was final, cutting through the tension with an air of absolute authority. He straightened his coat and looked the security chief squarely in the eye. "I must insist you assemble Major Finch and Dr. Webber. Have them meet us in Professor Blackwood's laboratory in half an hour. It is time the final act of this tragedy was played out for all to witness," Sherlock Holmes observed sharply. We were assembled once more in the late Professor Blackwood's laboratory, but the character of the room had changed entirely. Where before there had been the quiet hum of scientific inquiry, there now hung a silence so profound it seemed to press upon the very ears. The faint, astringent scent of ozone lingered in the air, a ghostly reminder of the tragedy. A single gas lamp hissed softly on a side bench, casting long, dancing shadows that made the rows of silent glass beakers resemble a congregation of skeletal observers. We, the living, felt ourselves the true specimens under examination. Major Finch paced a short, agitated line by the door, his boots scuffing softly on the stone floor. Mr. Croft stood ramrod straight near the chemical cabinet, his expression a mask of rigid certainty. And beside the central work-table, Dr. Eleanor Vance was a study in stillness, her hands clasped before her, her gaze fixed upon some indeterminate point on the far wall. It was upon this tense tableau that Holmes's voice fell, not with a crash, but with the cool, incisive precision of a surgeon's scalpel. We have entertained two principal theories regarding the unfortunate demise of Professor Blackwood. Let us dispense with them now, so that we may arrive at the truth, Sherlock Holmes noted. He turned first to the head of security, his eyes glinting in the lamplight. Mr. Croft, you have been most adamant in your belief that this was a tragic accident, a case of a brilliant mind undone by his own volatile materials. An admirable theory for its simplicity, remarked Sherlock Holmes. It is the only logical conclusion. The door was locked from within. The man was a known risk-taker, said Mr. Silas Croft. And yet logic must bow to fact. Pray observe the residue on the floor. Had the flask of nitric acid exploded from this table, as you suggest, the spray would be uniform, radial. But you will note this distinct void in the pattern, here, behind the leg of the table. A shadow. A shape was shielding this spot when the acid was released. The shape, I submit, of a man already lying upon the floor, declared Sherlock Holmes. Croft did not reply, but the rigid mask of his certainty seemed to crack, a subtle tension hardening the line of his jaw. Holmes, having planted his seed of doubt, then shifted his attention to the Major, who had ceased his pacing. Then we have the matter of espionage, Major, the missing notes, the potential for a German agent in our midst. A grave concern, and one which seemed all but confirmed when the research was discovered, stated Sherlock Holmes. It is the clear motive, Holmes. Blackwood was silenced and his work stolen for the enemy, remarked Major Alistair Finch. A most compelling narrative. Yet it possesses a fatal flaw. A spy who has secured such vital intelligence does not linger. They flee. They do not, under any circumstances, attempt to surreptitiously return the stolen documents to the scene of the crime days later. To do so is not the act of an agent, but of a murderer attempting to muddy the waters, to remove the very motive they so carefully fabricated. Sherlock Holmes said. The Major stared, the confident fire in his eyes extinguished and replaced by a dawning, bewildered uncertainty. The foundations of the case were being systematically demolished before our eyes, leaving a terrifying void. Holmes let the silence stretch, his gaze sweeping over the two men, before coming to rest with a quiet finality upon the still figure at the centre of the room. My own heart hammered against my ribs. I saw it then, the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in Dr. Vance's clasped hands. Holmes took a single step forward, and the soft hiss of the gas lamp seemed to be the only sound left in the world. The culprit was not a bungler, nor a foreign agent. The culprit was someone who knew the professor's habits intimately. Someone with the chemical knowledge to stage this scene, the access to move about freely, and the cold ambition to see it through. Someone who sought not to sell Blackwood's work, but to inherit it. His voice, which had been analytical, now held a new edge, as sharp and as cold as frosted steel. He did not raise it, yet it seemed to fill every corner of the laboratory. "Is that not so, Dr. Eleanor Vance? It was you who murdered your mentor," Sherlock Holmes pointed out. The silence in Professor Blackwood's laboratory pressed in upon us, a physical weight thick with the lingering scent of ozone and the unspoken accusation Holmes had just delivered. Major Finch stared, mouth agape, while Dr. Vance, the object of the charge, remained unnaturally composed. She did not recoil or protest, merely watching my friend with an expression of detached curiosity. His voice, when it came, was a choked whisper. "Dr. Vance, Holmes, this is preposterous. The room was sealed from the inside. Croft confirmed it himself. It was impossible," said Major Alistair Finch. Holmes replied, his tone as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "Impossible is a word reserved for that which defies natural law, Major, not for that which merely defies expectation. The door was indeed bolted, the window was latched, but you failed to consider the third dimension," observed Sherlock Holmes. He gestured with a long, thin finger towards a metal grill high on the wall, the ventilation duct. The sound of our own breathing seemed unnaturally loud in the ensuing quiet. The screws on that grate, whilst appearing rusted, bear the faintest scratches of a modern screwdriver. There is a trace of machine oil quite fresh on the threads, and upon the floor directly beneath it, had you looked with a lens, you would have found minute particles of soot and metal filings, consistent with it being recently removed and replaced. A slender individual, possessing some agility, could readily pass through that duct from the adjoining storage closet. Our gazes snapped to Dr. Vance. Her calm was broken by a smile, a chilling, bloodless thing that did not reach her eyes. The quiet scrape of her chair as she rose echoed in the stark room. Her voice was steady, imbued with a cold and terrible pride. "Very good, Mr. Holmes. Your powers of observation are not exaggerated. Agility and a small bottle of oil. It was quite simple," responded Dr. Eleanor Vance. The Major stammered. "Then the catalyst. The German compound. You are an agent of the enemy," remarked Major Alistair Finch. Dr. Vance gave a short, dismissive laugh, a sound utterly devoid of humour. "An agent? Do not be so pedestrian, Major. The catalyst was a master stroke of misdirection, I admit. But it was not I who procured it from the Germans. It was the Professor himself," answered Dr. Eleanor Vance. This revelation struck us into a fresh silence, the shock of it a palpable thing in the air. She continued, her voice turning to ice. "He was a vain man. He could not abide that a German mind had solved a problem that eluded him. He acquired it through a discreet third party in Switzerland, our dear Dr. Weber's university, ironically enough, to study it, to reverse engineer it and claim the discovery as his own. I simply used his own duplicity to cast suspicion upon an innocent man and create the illusion of espionage," remarked Dr. Eleanor Vance. I found myself asking, the word escaping me before I could think, "But why? Why go to such monstrous lengths?" commented Dr. John Watson. She turned her gaze upon me, and for the first time I saw the fanaticism burning behind her placid facade. The faint hiss of a distant Bunsen burner was the only sound. Because the antidote was my work, my calculations, my theoretical models, my breakthrough. He intended to present it to the War Office under his name alone. He called me his able assistant. He saw me as a cog in his great machine, a tool to be discarded when its purpose was served. His folly was not in his chemistry, gentlemen. It was in underestimating the ambition of an intellect superior to his own. I did not steal state secrets. I merely claimed the credit that was due to me, and removed the man who would deny me my legacy. Dr. Eleanor Vance replied. Her confession, delivered without a tremor of remorse, hung in the sterile air. It was not the plea of a criminal, but the proud dissertation of a scholar. In that moment I understood we were in the presence not of simple greed or patriotic betrayal, but of an intellectual pride so vast and consuming it had become a murderous, monstrous thing. The rhythmic percussion of the wheels upon the track provided a steady, almost hypnotic counterpoint to the turmoil of the preceding days. As the patchwork of the English countryside sped past our window, a blanket of grey mist clinging to the distant trees, a profound quiet settled within our carriage. Major Finch, who had been staring blankly at the fleeting scenery, finally turned towards us, the rigid military posture he typically maintained softened by a palpable wave of relief. His voice, when he spoke, was low and devoid of its customary clipped authority. I confess, Mr. Holmes, I am in your debt. A debt the entire nation shares, though they shall never know it. The preliminary analysis is complete. The notes are intact, every last formula, remarked Major Alistair Finch. A satisfactory result, Holmes replied, tapping the ash from his pipe into a small tray. The war effort can ill afford such setbacks, explained Sherlock Holmes. It is a marvel you saw through the espionage plot so swiftly, Holmes, I remarked. The stolen notes, the German connection. It was a most convincing performance, Dr. John Watson added. Holmes offered a slight smile, a flicker of intellectual satisfaction in his keen grey eyes. It was too convincing, Watson. A true foreign agent would have ensured the notes were irrevocably lost or destroyed, for their value lay in their absence. Dr. Vance, however, could not bear to see her own genius annihilated. Her pride demanded that her work, the work she felt was stolen from her, should survive. She merely hid it, creating a puzzle she was confident only she could solve, a monument to her own cleverness. That was her error. Pride, not patriotism, was the ruling passion here. Major Finch simply shook his head, a humbled man. The remainder of our journey passed in companionable silence, the steady clatter of the train a soothing sound that carried us back towards the familiar gas-lit streets of London. By late evening, Holmes and I were once more installed in our armchairs at 221B Baker Street, the cheerful blaze in the hearth crackling and spitting, a welcome comfort against the November chill that seeped in from the foggy streets below. A dark business, all told, I said, breaking the long silence. To see such a brilliant mind turn to murder, responded Dr. John Watson. The flicker of intellectual satisfaction I had seen on the train was gone, replaced by a profound stillness. Holmes did not look at me, his gaze fixed instead upon the glowing embers in the grate. He had refilled his pipe, and the fragrant blue smoke curled towards the ceiling in a thoughtful, almost melancholic haze. Every great conflict is a crucible, Watson. It accelerates not only industry and invention, but the very passions of mankind. Ambition, jealousy, pride, they burn hotter and with a more volatile flame in such times. Professor Blackwood's ultimate folly was not in his chemical experiments, but in his failure to understand the human element. He sought to suppress a brilliant mind, failing to recognize that the ambition he saw as a flaw in his protégé was but a mirror of his own. He fell silent then, leaning back as the mantelpiece clock chimed the hour. The case was closed. A vital weapon in the defense of our men was secure. Yet, as I looked at my friend's sharp profile silhouetted against the firelight, I knew the resolution brought him little joy. Outside, the familiar rumble of a carriage on the wet cobblestones was a comforting return to normalcy. But in the quiet of our rooms, the ghost of the alchemist's folly seemed to linger, a sombre testament to the terrible, destructive power of a genius denied.